Hello, this is Tom Turner with another podcast in a series which takes an overview of urban design, garden design and landscape design, their history, theory, position and prospects. This podcast video asks and answers 20 fundamental questions about landscape architecture as an art and as a profession. There's a link to a playlist at the end of the video, and clicking on it takes you to videos which answer most of the questions in more detail. Or, if you prefer text, you can read my ebook on landscape architecture, available from Amazon. So let's get started. Question 1. What is landscape architecture? Answer. Landscape architecture is the art of composing landform, water and plants with buildings and pavements to make good places. Question 2. What are the aims of landscape architecture? Answer. They're Vitruvian. Landscape architects aim to make places with good functional, ecological and visual qualities. Question 3. Was Frederick Law Olmsted the father of landscape architecture? Answer. No. But he was the father of the organised profession for which he chose the name landscape architecture. Question 4. What is landscape theory? Answer. It is the theory of how to make good outdoor space. And this involves giving further answers to questions about the what, why, when, how, where and who of landscape architecture, which I did in the 2017 ebook. Question 5. What is the history of landscape design? Answer. It can be treated either as equivalent to the history of garden design or as a history of both garden design and urban design, or as a complete history of design by humans on the natural environment, therefore including forestry, agriculture and other land uses. I favour the second alternative and trace the written history of landscape architecture to about 5,000 years ago. Jellicoe goes back about 30,000 years, using archaeology rather than text to outline an art which is much older than architecture. Question 6. What is the origin of the term landscape architecture? Answer. It's agreed that the originator's name began with the letter M. It could have been either Morel, Jean-Marie, or Meeson, Gilbert Lang. My vote goes to Meeson, who published a book on it in 1828. Question 7. Is there a problem with the term landscape architecture? Answer. Yes. The problem is that people find it hard to understand. Olmsted wrote that landscape is not a good word, architecture is not, the combination is not. Mawson wrote that people understand landscape architecture as an unwarranted interference with nature. Jellicoe wrote that the landscape architect is still surely wrongly named. And not to be left out, I wrote in 1997 that the term is as tyrannical as it is sacrilegious as it is preposterous. I'll be happy to retract this comment if the two words which make up the term come to be used more carefully. Question 8. How should the term landscape be understood in the phrase landscape architecture? Answer. Its meaning takes something from its use by artists, poets and geographers, but draws mainly upon its use, in a designer's sense, in 18th century England. Typically, a designed landscape was, as it remains, a place where landform, water and plants have been composed with buildings and pavings for human use and enjoyment. Question 9. How should the term architecture be understood in the phrase landscape architecture? Answer. It should be understood in the broad sense outlined by Vitruvius, rather than in the narrow post-Renaissance sense of designing buildings for human occupancy. Vitruvius used the word to describe the activity of coordinating the skills of other experts and other disciplines. The narrower sense in which it's now used by building architects makes architecture a subset of landscape architecture, just as they see interior design as a subset of architecture. Question 10. What is the collective landscape? Answer. The term was introduced by Sir Geoffrey Jellicoe on the dust jacket of his History of the Landscape of Man. It isn't explained in the book, but its place on the cover implies that Jellicoe was using it for a central objective of landscape design, to create landscapes which match the physical and psychological aspirations of humanity. Question 11. Does the landscape profession need professional societies? Answer. Yes. Institutes, societies and similar bodies have a vital role in promoting landscape architecture, in maintaining standards, and in raising standards. Question 12. What is the relationship between landscape architecture and urban design? Answer. The landscape architect's contribution to urban planning and design is that of composing landform, water and plants with buildings and pavings to make good outdoor space. Question 13. What is landscape planning? Answer. It's the first stage in the design process with an emphasis on public goods. At the larger scale, it involves plans for areas of land, including planning zones, geographical regions, and administrative areas. At the project scale, it involves environmental impact designs for land development projects. Question 14. Can landscape architects help combat climate change? Answer. Yes. At the site planning scale, we can ensure development projects have at least as much vegetation cover when complete as they did before construction began. On large sites, we can plan for carbon capture, microclimate, biodiversity, rewilding, surface water management, local energy generation, and local food production. Question 15. What is a greenway? Answer. A greenway can be defined as a route that is good from an environmental point of view. The history reaches back to the ancient world, and the idea was given its present character by Frederick Law Olmsted's wonderful emerald necklace in Boston. Question 16. What is context theory? Answer. It is the body of theory which underpins context-sensitive design, or, in Alexander Pope's phrase, how to consult the genius of the place. Question 17. Should landscape architects have a role in the design of city skylines? Answer. Yes, of course. but it's not going to happen unless and until the world's landscape professions do a better job of promoting themselves. Question 18. What is the landscape urbanism design method? Answer. It's an advance on traditional 2D plans and 3D models. The landscape urbanism design method involves design by layers, with each of the layers relating to a specialised area of knowledge and skill. A 9-layer project for a town square, for example, could include layers for painting, sculpture and music, hydrology, ecology, psychology, architecture and green transport. Question 19. Who were the great figures in the history of landscape architecture? Answer. Please see my short video on the landscape architecture canon in the East and in the West. There's a link to it on the YouTube playlist at the end of this video, based on a section in my Kindle ebook on landscape architecture. Question 20. Are the art and profession of landscape architecture likely to prosper? Answer. Maybe they will and maybe they won't. But with a good dose of conceptual clarification, they most certainly can. Well, that's all the answers I have for now. Thanks for listening. If interested, you can find more of my views on the gardenvisit.com and landscape architecture YouTube channels and websites, or you can subscribe on your podcast player to hear future podcasts about designing cities, landscapes and gardens.